Hello and welcome to Veterans of the Valley. I'm Tom Turbiville. Bill Adams wanted to be in the Air Force in 1950 and really had no designs on being a mechanic. But that's where the Air Force needed him, so he learned the craft and for the next 4 years kept B-29s in the air. Not in frigid Korea where the war was going on, but among other places in steaming hot Saudi Arabia. Bill Adams is one of many veterans who served his country, not in combat, but in still needed jobs that kept America safe. Please welcome Airman First Class Bill Adams to Veterans of the Valley. Bill, it's a pleasure to have you on Veterans of the Valley, and thank you again for your service. We had talked a little bit about, before we went on, talking about as a kid growing up in Texarkana, age 9 to 12 years old, that was when World War II was going on. Talk a little bit about how the war was viewed in Texarkana when you were in the, what, 6th, 7th, 8th grade?
About
right.
that time.
Right.
Everyone was very patriotic. Everyone was trying to do their do their part to help the war effort. We had the victory gardens. We had the tire rationing. We had, in school, we bought our 10 cents to buy the war bonds and collected the tin and things like that for what they needed to help in the war effort. I think I remember in my room I kept a map and where the war was going on, and I kept stick pins showing where the battles were taking place or where the front was expanding.
Right.
At that time, my dad did not have to go. I would say he didn't have to go. He would have gone had they called him. His job was driving a truck at Lone Star and Red River Ordnance. Mm-hmm. He picked up ammunition while they were producing it and took it to the igloos where they were stored. And of course, one spark, and it might as well have been a war zone, you know.
Right.
But it turned out okay. He did 3 years of doing that. It was a time that everybody pulled together. It was a time that the whole country was of the same mindset.
Right. And there were jobs, civilian jobs, that were considered essential to the war effort. I know back then where the people who were in those jobs did not have to serve because of that. You said your dad was a little bit older than most of the 19, 20-year-olds that were going off to war, but you did have a couple of uncles who served, one in the Battle of the Bulge, right?
That's true. And he was in combat in Europe. Mm-hmm. Served I think 4 or 5, whatever time, when the war was over, he came out and then went back and went to OCS and retired as a major years later.
Right.
But the other uncle, he served in England. I think he was in the Supply Corps, and he kept the guys supplied with what they needed over in Europe.
Meanwhile, you were growing up on the Arkansas side of Texarkana, and at age 18, you went into the Air Force. That was in 1950. Sort of talk about that.
Okay, I did, and was then, of course, like everyone, you go to Lackland Air Force Base. There were a lot of guys at that time afraid they were going to get drafted, so a lot of them enlisted in the Air Force. And we had, I was there for 10 days. We had what we call Tent City. They didn't have enough room for us in barracks, so they moved a bunch of us up to Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls, and I finished my basic training there. And then from Shepherd, they took us to New Mexico Highlands University, who had a contract with the Air Force for A&E mechanics and also a typewriter school.
Now, this isn't what you had in mind, though, when you entered the Air Force, right? You didn't think you were going to be a wrench twister, right?
Well, that's true. And you know, the Air Force, they give you a battery test to see what you're suited for, but it's not. That's not what they go by. It's where they need you. And they picked up our whole squadron, sent us out to New Mexico. And I was there for 16 weeks in training, and then they sent us to Chanute Air Force Base in Rantoul, Illinois, to finish specialized training on the engines we'd be working on. After 5 weeks there, we went to. I was sent to Seward Air Force Base, Smyrna, Tennessee, which is right outside of Nashville.
Right.
We were in an engine build-up shop. We were building engines. They would come in a big can, and we'd take them out and hang them up and drain what was in them to preserve them, put spark plugs on, put whatever it needed on them, and get them set up on the stand. And they were built for C-119s, which was a cargo type plane, which carried troops. And I was there for about 6 months. And during this time, we had people that were being taken out about every 2 weeks and to go to Korea.
Right.
I had a friend of mine who worked in the orderly room, and he came down one day and said he needed somebody to volunteer to go overseas. And of course, my first question was, is it someplace I might get shot at? And he said, it's probably not likely. And so, without thinking, I volunteered.
Right.
And I wound up in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia.
Quite a ways from Incheon, huh?
Did quite a ways. And of course, the main thing we fought over there was the temperature. It was, and you can understand now. You hear what it's like over in Iran in that area, and it's anywhere. A cool night would be down in the 80s, and a bad day would be 110 to 125.
Yeah.
And we would get up early in the morning, do the work on the airplanes, and then go back to our barracks, which we did have air conditioning at that time.
Right.
So during the heat of the day, we could be inside if we didn't have something really essential that we had to do.
Yeah. Well, it was either ice cold in Korea,
right,
where you'd be shot at, or the heat in Saudi Arabia. I guess of the two, you took the best. It had air conditioning.
Yeah.
It had air conditioning anyway. Yeah. So. They needed the volunteers overseas. Talk about Saudi Arabia. This was, as we view Saudi Arabia now, we just think of flat, dust, and desert.
Well, that was pretty much where I was.
Right.
It was on the east side of Saudi Arabia, Dhahran. It was a lot of desert there. Now, Aramco had, the Arabian American Oil Company had a big hangar there. They had more airplanes than we did, actually.
Right.
And they had a compound that was about 5 miles north of us, and we could go up there. We were allowed to go up and go to the library and the restaurant and the theater that they had up there. So that made it a little nicer.
Yeah.
The squadron that I joined was a detachment that was the 53rd Strategic Reconnaissance Squadron, known as Hurricane Hunters, and we can tell you more about those later.
Okay.
Our mission was to fly out of Dhahran north, and then we'd turn east over across top of Iran and fly south of Russia.
They had 4 B-29s,
We had
right?
4 B-29s, a detachment there. After flying across there, what we did was a normal air weather mission, just taking air samples, temperatures, dew points, whatever they do in those missions. And our primary purpose there as a spy mission, which I found out 20 years later after I've been there. But I knew we had a big black tank that we carried in the bomb bay, and it had a motor on it, and it sucked air into the tank. So in December of '52, when I was there, they did have a nuclear test, and we took the sample, and it was sent to Washington.
Right.
To take care of spare time while I was over there, I did get a part-time job.
Yeah.
I was with special services, and not like a special service fighting somebody. It was special services in radio. And I worked on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays in spare time at AFRD, which was the voice of the desert in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia.
You were a disc jockey.
A disc jockey is what it amounted to. We had, where you had programs now, you get them on tape and this sort of thing. We had big discs about this big around that we put on the turntable, and it was a 30-minute program. We could hear Bob Hope, and we could hear just different programs that they would send over to us that at that time the guys enjoyed hearing them.
Right.
And also we had played some records in between. We had country and western music and that sort of, and other music. I had a friend that was back in the States would send me a letter each week telling me what the top 10 were, and if we had that, we'd play them. So that took up some of the time to take care of the boredom.
So when the on-air light came on, what did you talk about? Did you talk about war news from Korea, news back in the United States? Did just anything you could come up with?
Just anything you come up with.
If
you had that information, where we were, we didn't get a lot of that information.
Right.
And but it was just enough to keep the guys entertained and something going on with them there.
Yeah, that's right. Give them the same old weather forecast. Going to be hot
Oh
tomorrow.
yeah, hot tomorrow, just like yesterday and the day coming. So anyway, in December, after we got the information that we needed from the test that we had,
Right.
we picked up the 4 airplanes and we went back to our headquarters. At that time, headquarters was in Kinley Air Force Base, Bermuda.
Yeah, that's tough.
That was tough duty.
I
believe
bet.
me. Yes.
The weather got nicer for
The
you.
weather
didn't
got
it?
much nicer, and the runway was right on the beach almost, and you could work on the airplane. If you get a little bit warm, you go down, take a swim, come back, and finish your work.
Yeah.
It was nice there. It really was. And then I was there for until September of '53, and we moved our headquarters again, and this time we went to Burtonwood, England.
I see.
Which is up between Manchester and Liverpool, which is, well, up there I got into the rain and the fog, so I've had all kind of different weather that I've served in when I was, that 4 years I was there.
That's right. But you decided about in 1954 that you didn't want to be a mechanic the rest of your life, so you
That's true.
you took your discharge.
I took discharged and came out of southern England, and we had a ship that we boarded, a troop ship called the USS General Upshur.
Right.
And I spent about 8 of the most miserable days of my life on that ship, and I knew I would never want in the Navy, and, because I was pretty sick coming across there.
You'd been flown everywhere else, every other detail that you had.
Every other assignment I went
but
on.
when you went home, they put you on a boat, sent you into a storm.
That's right.
And you were eating a lot of soda crackers.
A bunch. That's the only thing I existed on for that time. It was pretty tough.
Yeah.
But
I want to go back to the mission out
Okay.
of Saudi Arabia. Talk just a little bit more about that. Now you were a mechanic. You were keeping the planes in good order, keeping them in the air. B-29 is a complicated machine. Obviously, this is one of the most important aircraft of the World War II effort. Also in Korea, you know,
Right.
this is the Enola Gay was a B-29. I mean,
right.
this was is a big aircraft. Was it a complicated aircraft to keep in the air?
It could be. We had a lot of problem with keeping spark plugs running in it, and it was just a big airplane, and it took a lot of work and a lot of maintenance to keep them flying. In fact, there's only one in the world today that's still flying.
Really?
And that one is with the Commemorative Air Force out in Midland, Texas.
I see.
And yeah, they just finished putting engines on that thing. It's several $1 million. I don't know how the Air Force kept from going broke just flying B-29s. They burn a lot of gas, and it takes a lot of work on them. We had 16 aircraft in our squadron, so we had to just set up a regular work maintenance and just rotate them as they needed work done on them. We'd rotate them through their maintenance work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I hope those engines last a while. I don't know if 4 new engines will be in the new budget. I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
Exactly.
Now, while we were
go ahead.
in Bermuda, I believe it was in either August or September of '53, we had a hurricane evac, and the airplanes all came over to Columbia, South Carolina. At that time, I was in New York at the time that this took place, and when they deployed and going back to Bermuda, one of the aircraft had a engine problem. Well, it was the prop governor failed on it. The right outboard prop actually oversped, came loose, and hit the other engine. Of course, this was not a good situation.
Right.
We had, I believe there were 5 people in the front of the airplane. One of them got out. There were 6, I believe, in the rear. All of them got out, but one was not found afterwards. We don't know whether his chute failed or whether he just panicked and or was pulled under. And they floated around out in the Atlantic that night. And then the next day, an Exxon ship called Sea Train Georgia picked them up and took them back to.
Yeah. Now, fortunately for you, you were not on base at the time. You were in New York City,
I was in New York City
I
at
believe
the
you
time,
said.
yeah.
Had you been on base, you might likely have been on that plane.
Yes, because one of the people that was on the plane was off the crew of the airplane that I worked on. And
I see.
It just happened to be that he was the one that was picked, and had I been there, I could have easily been the one that was picked to be on it.
Right.
So
right.
the good Lord was looking after me on that trip.
Indeed, indeed. So after a 4-year hitch, I guess, you were from 50 to 54?
Right. Got out in 54, September 54. Went to
Went back to school.
Went to college in Texarkana. And
Was it back to Texarkana Junior College? Or
Yes.
You had gone, so you went back to school because you had taken a semester there before you went in, right?
That's correct. And so I went back and took some more, and it's again working part-time in radio.
Right.
At two of the stations there, KOSY and KTFS.
Right, in
and,
Texarkana.
In Texarkana. And then went from there to Hope, Arkansas, and worked at KXAR for about 6 months, and then decided radio wasn't the thing I wanted to be in, so I applied.
You're telling me you can't get rich in radio, huh?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I knew that.
Either the salesman and the owners get rich, and the poor guy behind the mic is the one that's doing the work. Anyway, I got a job with Eastern Airlines in Atlanta, Georgia, and was there for 2 years, and then transferred after I got married while I was there, and transferred to Memphis, Tennessee, which was my wife at the time. That was her home. And
it's about 1958 we're talking about.
That was 58, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1963, I got a job with the FAA. In air traffic control.
Air traffic control.
Right.
I want to come back to that in a minute,
Okay.
because that's an interesting story about what that led to also. We've got just a few pictures here that I want to show that you've given to us to show about with the B-29. And then there is a B-29. Now talk about specifically this one, that attachment that's on the top of the plane.
That one was where they took air samples in the top, and they collected them. And what the main purpose was, well, of course, we did that in Saudi Arabia when they took the air samples when they dropped the nuclear test. We got that, but there is a function that they use that for, and then that's I'm not really sure at this point what the air weather people did with it. But anyway, we had 16 of those aircraft, the B-29s, and then next.
This is a publicity photo. You're not in this picture,
I'm
but
not,
this is a publicity photo of a mechanics crew, right?
Yes, this picture I understand was taken in 1945, and just giving the mechanics a little bit of publicity and a little bit of the what they need to show what their job was really important to the people to keep those things in the air.
That's great photography, if that was truly, you know, the Now this, we're going to jump ahead a little bit in our story, and you're going to tell us more about that later. But right now, you talked about the Confederate Air Force, which is now called the Commemorative Air Force, and you're a member of that. You used to be a commander of that, right?
Last year I was
commander of that. They're based out of Georgetown.
Yeah.
And this is your all's plane. It's a B-25.
Right. It's actually the Marine. It represents a Marine squadron, VMB 612, which served in the South Pacific, and we maintain and keep that airplane flying. And in fact, in this coming June the 9th, when Coulter Field has their air show, they're having open house. We plan to have it here at that air show so everybody can see it and get a look at what those airplanes look like.
And you do, as a member of the Commemorative Air Force, you still do work on that. You still turn the wrench on that, right?
Still turning wrenches and still working on it, and fly to air shows on it, which I'll be going to one next week in Brownsville.
Right,
Yeah.
right. 1963, and you touched on this, you got a job as in air traffic control in Memphis, and you were there for 19 years. Before you went to Houston.
No, I was there 10 years.
10 years, excuse me. Yeah, that's 10 years before you went to Houston, for 8.5 years.
Right.
And talk about that job, air traffic control. People think about that job. It's considered one of the high stress jobs that there is out there. And did you find it that way? Was it
there? Probably like in radio, you can have a high stress time, and you can have where everything goes smooth. We had those kind of days. Right. We'd have days where traffic was smooth and was light. Our biggest days was usually on Friday and Sunday. Fridays you had the military going cross country, you had the corporate people that are coming home for the weekend, and then you have your regular air carriers that are flying all the time.
Right.
And then on Sunday it was just reverse.
Right.
The military was coming back to their base, the corporates were getting ready to go work, and still had and you had your private aircraft in there too, so you were working all of them.
Yeah. Now you're in Memphis. Was FedEx in business then?
They were just getting ready to go in business when I left there.
I see.
And so I didn't get into that, but I understand that a friend of mine that worked there said at midnight it was the busiest airport in the country.
Oh, I'll bet.
You had all of them coming in at one place and all of them leaving during that time, and about 4 hours were just a real busy time.
Yeah, because when they first started up until just a few years ago, and I think they do it a little bit differently now, that if you sent a package to your next door neighbor, that package went to Memphis
That's
first,
right.
and then came
And
back.
came back.
Yeah,
That's true.
right,
That's
right. I think they've got hubs now to where everything doesn't go to Memphis, but I remember that. So then you went to Houston, same job,
Right.
at for 8.5 years.
8.5 years. There were some interesting things going on there at Houston. I worked in an area down in the southwest. I worked in Brownsville, Laredo, that area, and I worked aircraft out of Laredo Air Force Base. And it was not unusual to have a launch a U-2 out of there, and he'd go up, he'd go off your frequency, and you wouldn't hear from him for another 10 or 12 hours, and he'd come back in wanting clearance to land, and you don't know where he'd been or what he was doing. You can speculate, but you know how that goes.
Yeah, right.
And another interesting thing was that the SR-71, which was a spy plane, and nobody was supposed to know about it and see about it. And I did get to work a few of those.
I see.
They would come out of somewhere, some altitude. We could tell if they tell us a certain code word. We could tell how high they were, and they would come down. They would do a refueling. They would have a refueling track and then meet up with a C-135 refueler, and between 24 and 25,000 feet, and they'd go on that racetrack and refuel, and then they'd cut loose from the refueler, and then they'd go back to wherever they were doing and whatever they were doing.
Right.
And I have tracked them. Of course, this is slow for them at 1,700 miles an hour across our radar scope. And it was very interesting to talk to him. You put him on one center frequency, and he flew the whole center frequency.
Right.
Rather than if he was changing the frequency every time he went to a new sector, that's all he could do, would be changing the frequencies.
Yeah.
He'd go through so fast.
Right.
But it was interesting, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Until it ended in 1981, and a lot of people, of course, know you were one of the 12,000 who were fired by President Reagan.
That's true. Not too many people can make the statement that when you get fired, you go all to the top.
That's right. You're fired by the president.
Yeah, and
right?
it was a lose-lose situation. If you did go out, we weren't sure we were going to get fired, but we did. If you stayed in, and the others that did go out, and then the strike had been settled, then you're sitting there working with the guys that had gone out, and with the type of job you're that kind, you could really make it unpleasant for somebody.
Right.
So I was able to get into criminal justice. I got in adult probation in Montgomery County.
Right.
And I worked there until '94, which I retired from there. And I didn't retire. I retired from that job. I didn't retire. After that, I was managing some apartments for about 4 years, and then about 18 months in Mexico, and then moved up came back to Mexico. My daughter lives here. In fact, she works for the 12-Man Foundation here on campus.
Right.
And I moved in with her. Had been single for some time, and
you found new life.
I found new life. Sure
yes,
did. Sure
with
did.
a new person.
Right.
That's right. That's right. Talk about that, because you were attending your aunt's 89th birthday party. Right.
Out at Curtin. She lived at Curtin, and I went to her 89th birthday and met my wife to be there. And our first date was an air show in Georgetown, Texas.
Of course it was. Right. Did she want to go?
Oh yes.
Oh yeah. Okay.
In fact, she's a member of the Commemorative Air Force now. And but it's been a good life since then. Unfortunately, my aunt passed away in November of last year at age 99.
Wonderful
and
life.
had a wonderful life. Sure
Right.
did. Sure did.
Right.
In the meantime, I've gotten involved in a few things here in the community.
Yeah.
I am on the City Council of Curtin. I'm a member of the Brazos Valley Veterans Memorial Executive Board, Crime Stoppers Executive Board, and very involved with American Legion, which is a great organization for some of these new guys that are coming back from overseas getting their discharges, or that are here that can get into it. There's a lot of benefits for the veterans that we can help them with. We have a service officer that helps them fill out paperwork and other things they need, so we'd highly recommend them get involved, and also invite them to our 8 o'clock Thursday morning coffee every week from 8 to 10, and get to meet a lot. You don't have to be a veteran to be there. I mean, you don't have to be a member of the American Legion to be there, but just come out and
sit around and tell stories. As a matter
sit
of
around.
fact, that's where I met you a couple of weeks ago.
That's right.
We arranged this interview at that Thursday morning breakfast over at the American Legion. Well, that's great that you stay involved, and your wife, Kathy, is a member of the auxiliary
Yes,
for the American Legion.
She is.
And she stays very, very involved too.
She does.
Right, right. So when you look back at your experience, again, you weren't a combat veteran, but certainly you served a very essential need, and you've got to feel that way.
I do. And the squadron I was in, the 53rd Strategic Reconnaissance Squadron, as I say, was known as the Hurricane Hunters. They are now stationed in Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi, and still doing the same type of work.
Right.
We did fly a different kind of profile in the Hurricanes. I understand the way they fly into it and kind of make an X and go back across it. The B-29, we got on the outside of the Hurricane, the same rotation that it was going, and just moved in closer and closer to the middle, and we got into the eye of the Hurricane. And at that point, the eye might be 20 miles across, so then they would climb out and go out the top of it, where they wouldn't have to go through that again.
And they fly C-130s, right?
C-130s now, yes.
Yeah.
Which is turboprops.
The turboprops.
Right.
That's right.
Yes.
You play golf or anything? Or you?
No, I guess my hobby mostly is with the Commemorative Air Force and American Legion, involved with that sort of
right.
thing.
Now you said in June out at Coulter there's going to be
there is a open house, and everyone is invited to come out. They're making some great plans. I'm kind of working with them since I live here and in getting the B-25 over here, and they're going to have some other military aircraft that will be coming in,
right.
Replicas, and also we're trying to get some helicopters from, say, from Conroe or from Fort Hood to be here.
Right. It's June of 2011, I want to tell folks that...
June the 9th.
Yeah, June the 9th of 2011,
Right.
because you may be watching this show as a new show or a little bit later on. So that'll be coming up at Coulter Field. Thank you very much for your service, and thanks for being our guest.
It's my pleasure.
I appreciate it, Bill.
Thank you.
Besides turning wrenches on the B-29s, Bill Adams is active with the American Legion Earl Graham Post in Bryan, where his wife Kathy is a member of the auxiliary there. And we thank him and we salute him for his service, not only on American soil, but the far reaches of the globe. I'm Tom Turbiville. Be sure and join us next time on Veterans of the Valley.